You know, Republicans are somewhat dismayed. They want to line up behind their frontrunner, Donald Trump. But just about the time he's got them on board, he cuts loose with some crazy attack on some lesser figure. And people are saying, why are you doing that? Will you ever stop attacking people and be presidential? Terry?
Well, this latest one has been about a judge that is in charge of this whole Trump University lawsuit. Trump says the judge is Mexican descent and won't give him a fair trial because he wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. Dale Hurd has that story.
Donald Trump is refusing to back down in his contention that federal Judge Gonzalo Curiel could not preside over a fair trial in a fraud case against Trump University because his parents were born in Mexico.
He's a member of a club or society very strongly pro-Mexican, which is all fine. But I say he's got bias. I want to build a wall. I'm going to build a wall.
And Trump went further.
If it were a Muslim judge, would you also feel like they wouldn't be able to treat you fairly because of that policy of yours?
It's possible, yes. Yeah, that would be possible, absolutely.
Isn't there sort of a tradition, though, in America that we don't judge people by who their parents were and where they came from?
I'm not talking about tradition. I'm talking about common sense, okay?
Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, a Trump supporter and widely considered to be a possible running mate, severely criticized Trump's remarks.
This is one of the worst mistakes Trump has made. And I think it's inexcusable. This judge was born in Indiana. He is an American, period.
But Gingrich added he considers Trump a remarkable leader who learns very quickly. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton grabbed the chance to aim her fire at Trump.
What Trump is doing is trying to divert attention from the very serious fraud charges against Trump University.
And on NBC's Meet the Press, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also criticized Trump, but he would not say if he thought what Trump said was racist.
Is that not a racist statement?
I couldn't disagree more with a statement like that.
Is it a racist statement?
I couldn't disagree more with what he had to say.
Republican leaders were urging Trump to start unifying the party and start acting like a potential leader of the United States. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, we just hope. But there's so many people that want so badly to see a change in administration. They want to see different policies, and they think that Trump may be the man to bring them in. But somehow or other, somebody's got to say to him, you know, when I was growing up, there was a great fighter. His name was Joe Louis. He was one of the most famous boxers around. And what they used to say was, Joe Louis, don't fight in bars. You know, the great fighters go into the ring in front of a whole lot of people, and then they pick their battles, but they don't go into brawls in bars. And Trump is going for the biggest job in the world, to be the leader of the free world. And as such, you don't go engage in barroom brawls. You just don't do it. And somebody's got to say, remember Joe Louis, he don't fight in bars. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, is joining us now from Washington. Welcome, Newt. You let the presumptive leader have it. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I love your Joe Louis line, and it's exactly right. You know, Trump can decide to win battles, or Trump can decide to win the presidency. I'm not sure he can do both. But, you know, Reagan went through something like this, Pat. You'll remember back in August of 1980, they spent almost a month getting reorganized because they were just off message. Things weren't working. They clearly weren't going to beat Jimmy Carter unless they got their act together. So hopefully Trump is having that challenge a few months earlier. But clearly the jump from being a candidate in the primary to being the candidate and leader of his entire party is a really profound change. I said it was like shifting from being a golfer where all the decisions were Trump's to being the leader of a football team where the rest of the team has to know where you're going so they can execute their play. But let me just also point out, the biggest political news last week wasn't what Trump said. The biggest political news was Friday's jobs report, where the number of jobs created was so tiny that we created in America last month one job for every 8,000 Americans. Now, Hillary can't carry that kind of a burden into the general election and win. If the Obama big government, big bureaucracy, high-cost policies continue to crush the economy, I think that's going to defeat Hillary. And all of these political noises are going to be much less important to the average American than what's happening to their pocketbook and to their job.
If Trump is the winner, what would you tell him the priority should be for those first 100 days that are so crucial?
Well, I mean, first of all, he has to build the wall because he said he would, and I think it's important to keep faith with the American people. And I think for him to back off would be to cripple the very authenticity he has. Second, I'd say focus on jobs, cut regulations, sign the agreement for the Keystone Pipeline, introduce a tax plan to make it desirable to create jobs in America, to stay in America, renegotiate in a very tough way. You know, when you learn from the Director of National Intelligence in a public testimony that the Chinese last year stole $360 billion in intellectual property of the United States, we have every right to be very tough negotiators. Free trade doesn't mean stupid trade, and it doesn't mean letting somebody be a crook. And I think that there are things Trump could do in the first 30 to 60 days that would really set the stage for a dramatic rebound towards a Reagan-style economy where we grow at 5 or 6 or 7% a year.
Do you think he's buying that? Is that what's on his heart, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, the frustrating thing with Trump is that the big picture stuff is really amazing. He's come an extraordinary distance in 1 year. Nobody has ever come from outside politics as decisively as he has. He's clearly articulating what millions and millions of Americans feel. And on the big things, I think he is a remarkable leader. And he's just got to get a little better at some of the small things. And I think at that point, he becomes very formidable.
Well, you know, the president seems to be ruling by decree these days without Congress, without anybody. He's just making these decisions and sending out letters telling people about transgender bathrooms and all this sort of thing. Trump could, with executive order, he could cancel a great deal of the Obama confusion that's been going on, can't he?
Yeah, he can, and I think they ought to plan to have the first 2 or 3 days spent just literally wiping out the non-legal things and the non-constitutional things that Obama's been doing. And I know that there's several groups working on this, developing a whole set of new repeal orders, if you will. And I think that just in itself would send a remarkable signal to the country. He's also got to come in with a very key reform that allows us to fire corrupt, criminal, and dishonest federal employees. Right now, the unions have such a grip on the federal government that even if somebody's a crook, it's almost impossible to fire them. You're not going to run the federal government the way Trump wants to until you get the power to get rid of people who refuse to obey orders, who in some cases are criminal and in many cases are corrupt.
Well, does that go back to the Hatch Act, or what is preventing...
No, it would go all the way back to the Pendleton Act of 1883. It just gives you a sense of how it's structured. You know, my favorite example is in the Veterans Administration, which is really important to our veterans and really terribly run. And in Puerto Rico, the union won an argument that a woman who had pled guilty to armed robbery had to be reinstated in the Veterans Administration because her 2 immediate bosses were a convicted sex offender and a convicted drug abuser. And therefore, since they were both convicted, it wasn't appropriate to not rehire her just because she'd engaged in armed robbery. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. These are sick organizations.
No, you can't. That's too fantastic. Well, listen, going to your own personal, you've been put in one of the top lists of vice president. Are you interested in that at all, or have they talked to you?
Look, I mean, Callista and I believe you have to serve the country. We did just something I know will be close to your heart. We just finished a wonderful movie, The First American, about George Washington, premiered it at Mount Vernon. So we're doing a lot of things we're really enjoying. You know, I think we'd have to wait and see. I would be open to talking about it, because as a citizen, I think you should always be prepared to serve your country. But I would want to understand that it was a substantive job and not just a cheerleader job in order to really seriously consider it.
Who are the people right now? Has he put together a conference of wise men, as they say, to advise him?
I don't think so.
You
I
don't?
think look, this is a guy who has been astonishingly competent by listening to himself. He called me he called me months ago and said, he wanted some advice about something. I said, look, you operate off of a set of intuitions I don't understand. They're objectively working. My patterns are very different than yours. I will just mess you up if I try to get you to do what I do, because we have such very different operating styles. And so I have great respect for his abilities. I do think getting a wider and wider circle. He met recently with Henry Kissinger. He met recently with Jim Baker. I think he's beginning to reach out in a serious way. And he ultimately needs to have kind of a kitchen cabinet of very senior people who can sit down with him and behind closed doors tell him what he needs to hear, even if he doesn't want to hear it. But I think he'll get there. I think he's come an amazing distance in just 1 year.
Do you think he's going to win?
Probably. I think it's very hard to take one job for every 8,000 Americans. The failure in Libya, the failure in Russia, the failure in Syria, go down the list. Hillary Clinton has lots of words and no achievements, and I think that it's very hard to carry that to the presidency.
Do you think there's any possibility that Loretta Lynch is going to allow an indictment to go forward against Hillary?
I think it's possible. I mean, Lynch has got to ask herself, does she want to play the role of the obstructors in Watergate or the role of the people who cleaned it up? And I don't know that she wants to go down in history as an attorney general who turned down the FBI. What we don't know, in all sincerity, is what the FBI will recommend. We have no guarantee that they'll recommend indictment, even though the more we learn, there's not only a national security issue, there's a public corruption issue, which Bernie Sanders talked about yesterday when he said that taking money from dictatorships in the Clinton Foundation while she was Secretary of State is very clearly a conflict of interest.
Well, Newt, thank you so much for being with us. We wish you the best, and if you're the vice president, we'll support you 100%.
Thanks, Pat.
Right. God bless you. A tremendous friend for many, many years, and one of the most articulate people in the United States of America, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House of Representatives.